From ITN News at 10 with Julia Somerville.
Good evening. Pakistan today detonated 5 nuclear devices and entered a new arms race on the Asian subcontinent which has alarmed the world. The Pakistani Prime Minister said the explosions, his country's first ever nuclear tests, had settled its account with India, which carried out similar blasts a fortnight ago. The news was greeted with great enthusiasm in Pakistan and great condemnation elsewhere. Tonight, a state of emergency was declared in Pakistan. Our Asia correspondent Mark Austin reports.
In defiance of the world, there's jubilation in Pakistan tonight as they celebrate the underground blasts that announce their country's become a nuclear power to be reckoned with. News of the 5 nuclear tests, the first ever conducted by Pakistan, came in a dramatic broadcast to the nation by the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. He said the world hadn't done enough to punish India for its tests, and Pakistan had no choice but to detonate its own devices. Today, he said, we've settled the score with India. The detonations are a direct response to 5 nuclear tests carried out by India, Pakistan's arch-enemy and neighbour, earlier this month. The international community had urged restraint, but the Pakistan government has given in to domestic pressure and decided to show the world in general, and India in particular, that it too has a nuclear capability.
As a self-respecting nation, we had no choice left to us. Our hand was forced by the present Indian leadership's reckless actions.
In the Indian parliament, there was uproar as angry opposition MPs accused their own government of sparking a dangerous escalation in tensions. The Indian Prime Minister, though, said Pakistan's explosions vindicated India's decision to test its own weapons. More alarming still is that both sides say they are now adapting their long-range ballistic missiles to carry nuclear warheads. Crucially, China, Asia's nuclear superpower, blames India for the crisis. And this evening, Beijing urged all countries to show restraint.
Tonight, the entire region is praying that the most dangerous nuclear confrontation since the Cold War can be contained, that a potentially disastrous arms race won't spiral out of control. But there's also hope that now both sides have flexed their muscles, they'll agree enough is enough, and they may yet be persuaded to sign the Test Ban Treaty.
But the reality is that Pakistan and India have fought 3 wars in the last 50 years and came close to a 4th just 8 years ago. The conflict is over Kashmir, a disputed territory that will remain a flashpoint for the foreseeable future. The only difference is that now the world knows what a new war could bring. Mark Austin, News at 10.
Pakistan's decision to go ahead with the test provoked a predictably hostile response from around the world. President Clinton, who said he'd impose economic sanctions, called on both India and Pakistan to take steps to reverse what he called a dangerous arms race. Here, the Foreign Secretary Robin Cook spoke of his grave concern. Our diplomatic editor Robert Moore reports.
The news of the Pakistan test explosions broke just as Emperor Akihito was being greeted by Mr. Blair at Downing Street. The prospect of an Asian nuclear arms race will come as a particular shock to Japan, the only nation to have endured the horrors of a nuclear strike. Britain immediately expressed its dismay, having pleaded directly with Pakistan to exercise restraint. President Clinton has said Pakistan has lost a priceless opportunity to show leadership, but the CIA had warned him that Pakistan tests were imminent.
I cannot believe that we are about to start the 21st century by having the Indian subcontinent repeat the worst mistakes of the 20th century, when we know it is not necessary to peace, to security, to prosperity, to national greatness.
The prospects of an Asian-led nuclear arms race driven by Pakistan-Indian rivalry threatens to shatter the delicate web of international agreements designed to halt the spread of nuclear weapons. The post-Cold War security system, being discussed even today by foreign ministers in Luxembourg, centred on disarmament and on nuclear non-proliferation. Tonight, hopes of enforcing nuclear control agreements are looking forlorn. In Moscow, President Yeltsin has said that a South Asian nuclear arms race would damage global stability, and he vowed to act with the UN and the US to contain the crisis. For many years, the only nuclear states were those who sat at the top table at the United Nations. The US, the UK, France, Russia and China. It's well known that Israel too possesses a nuclear arsenal. Now though, India's tests 2 weeks ago and Pakistan's this morning show they've also crossed the nuclear threshold, possibly encouraging a new wave of development from others with nuclear ambitions. So there will also be grave concern among the established nuclear powers about how the so-called pariah states like North Korea and Libya will respond. Will they now redouble their efforts to acquire nuclear weapons? Robert Moore, News at 10 in Downing Street.
The British High Commissioner in Pakistan was ordered to return home today in protest at yesterday's nuclear bomb tests. While Pakistan is celebrated, the Foreign Secretary Robin Cook said Pakistan's response to the earlier tests by India had only increased tension. He also predicted Pakistan would face economic penalties. Our diplomatic editor Robert Moore reports.
For much of the day in Pakistan, wild celebrations have continued. Despite international condemnation and imminent economic punishment, the emergence of Pakistan as the world's first Islamic nuclear power is being seen as a matter of national pride. Earlier, a mock long-range missile was paraded through the streets. Pakistan, now the 7th declared nuclear state. The country's leaders insist it is all about essential self-defense, following Indian tests and provocations, but they acknowledge the dangers that now confront the region.
1/5 of the world population is in the subcontinent. And to have it unstable or with the war clouds hovering around, I think it's not good for the region or for the world. I hope there is no nuclear conflict, but the possibilities cannot be ruled out. It'll be a disaster.
The detonations took place yesterday in the remote southwest province of Baluchistan, although Pakistan has released almost no scientific data on the tests. The fear and the expectation now is that both India and Pakistan will mount nuclear warheads on their missiles. In effect, these volatile neighbours would then be capable of waging a nuclear war. Britain summoned Pakistan's High Commissioner to the Foreign Office to express its dismay. The Foreign Secretary, clearly alarmed at developments, says the expansion of the nuclear club involves grave risk.
It undermines the global attempts to prevent proliferation, and there will be other countries who also have a near nuclear capacity watching with interest how the world responds to this. And secondly, it is very serious indeed, because these are two countries who have real tensions between them.
But it is not just the unravelling of delicate nuclear arms agreements that is causing so much condemnation. There is also real frustration that two of the poorest countries in the world are now both engaged in a vastly expensive arms race. Robert Moore, News at 10, at the Foreign Office.
The UN Security Council is meeting in emergency session tonight to decide its response to another nuclear test by Pakistan. The government conducted the test its 6th in 3 days in defiance of massive international pressure, intensifying fears of a spiralling arms race. Our Asia correspondent Mark Austin reports.
They were celebrating again in Pakistan today after another nuclear test conducted in defiance of the world and which has plunged the subcontinent into further instability. These are the first pictures from the area where the tests have been conducted. It's largely deserted, but these villagers spoke of how they felt tremors and thought it was an earthquake. Pakistan's Foreign Secretary said today's test, like those on Thursday, was successful. He said Pakistan was now determined to enter dialogue to ensure mutual restraint. But with the new test has come new condemnation.
These tests are doing nothing to add to the security of either Pakistan or India. All that is happening is that they're increasing tension within the region.
India is blamed for starting the crisis by conducting tests earlier this month. But now facing anti-nuclear protests on its streets, the government is suddenly sounding conciliatory.
We have been calling for dialogue. We feel that it is necessary for us to engage in serious discussion with our interlocutors internationally in order to discuss all the issues.
As the two sides fight to outdo each other, the fear remains of an arms race spiralling out of control in one of the most volatile regions in the world. Mark Austin, ITN.
Pakistan has stood down its missile systems from red alert status against India and recalled them from forward positions in what's being seen as an easing of tension in their nuclear arms race. The scientists in charge of Pakistan's 6 nuclear tests have been given a hero's reception in the capital, Islamabad.
The government called for urgent action from India and Pakistan tonight to reduce the heightening tension between them. Refugees say the two countries exchanged heavy shell fire across the Kashmir border for a fifth day. India has now accused rebels in Kashmir of killing 34 villagers in a nearby Indian state. The dispute between Pakistan and India intensified in the wake of underground nuclear tests by both countries in May. The government faced